Recording.
We're live now.
We are live. All right. Well, this is Regional Fire Authority Planning Committee number 5. It is November 2nd at 10:08 a.m. And we'll go ahead and start with introductions. How about the North Whatcom Commissioners? Commissioner Ansel.
Bruce Ansel is here.
Vice Chair Fisher.
Fisher is here.
And Commissioner Bosman.
Commissioner Bossman is here.
And our District 4 Commissioners, Commissioner Hanson.
Present.
And Commissioner Andrews.
Andrews is here.
And our guests today are Chief Vanderveen.
Yep.
Our consultant Karen Reed.
Hello.
Ms. Parks.
I'm here.
And Ms. Sand.
I'm here.
Okay, we're all here. I take it everybody had the a chance to review the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any
Second.
discussion? Seconded by Commissioner Andrews. Any discussion about them? All right, doesn't look like any discussion. We'll go ahead and vote to approve. Everybody signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody oppose? Okay, approval of the agenda for this meeting. And we'll go ahead and review the, we'll approve the meeting minutes from the October 22nd meeting. Is there a second? Or excuse me, a motion to approve those minutes?
Also move.
Second.
Fisher. And any discussion about those? Anybody? Okay. Is there, we'll go ahead and vote to approve the October 22nd meeting minutes. Signify by saying aye.
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 Right.
Anybody opposed? All right, great. The approval of the minutes from October 22nd have been approved. Did you want us to approve the values and principles statement as read, as adopted? Karen, do we need to do that?
No, it's been approved. I just wanted to make sure you all had copies of it for your records. So that's just, we did that last time, and it's probably something you want to boot upstairs to your next commissioner meetings and just sort of share that with them if they haven't seen it already.
And there hasn't been any changes to those?
Nope.
Okay, and I think everybody should have got that in the agenda packet.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All righty. Well, I'll pass the torch over to Chief Vanderveen, and let's talk about updates to the website.
So we started to make updates to the website. It's both from the District 4 and the District 21 website. There's a tab that says RFA. Jenny started posting up the the FAQs that we went through previously. As well, we've added a counter to the website so we can see how many hits we're getting. Just so we have some idea of what people are, how many people are looking at it. We'll also be adding a little blurb to our to the responder, which is the newsletter that we send out, and it goes out both on paper and electronically. And we know that it gets distributed fairly widely up in the District 21 area. We'll need to find. We need to plug in with somebody in the south side of the district that's is quite a prolific emailer as the person we have up north. Gosh, I just lost my train of thought. We have we've had a request actually from one of our community members up in the north in the 21 area, Kathy Berg, who is really, she's a force multiplier, I guess is what I would call her. She's very into community events and sending out notices and keeping people engaged, especially with all the COVID stuff going on. And she's given us some feedback. Oh,
She's the unofficial mayor of Birch Bay.
correct. Yep. and chamber and steering committee and everything else. But she's actually asked us to consider moving our Zoom meetings to more of a webinar format where people could watch directly watch the Zoom meeting. So that's something that we're doing some more investigating, and it may be required more than anything for things like budget hearings and stuff that are coming up. Districts may have to do that anyway, so it may not be a bad. We'll just have to see kind of how that fits in and make that work.
Have you met with her, Chief, to talk with her about what the thinking is so far and all of this? Is that something that might be a good idea?
We've talked on the phone, and she's excited by the idea of the RFA. She likes anything that will streamline the delivery of services. So that's kind of her. And Commissioner Ansel, you know her as well, or if not better than I do. And if I misrepresent her.
Hey, Chief, your volumes went way down.
Yeah.
Better.
Better.
Yeah, she's really into the streamlining of services, and so I have had several phone conversations with her, and she's really the one that would like to be more involved, not necessarily on the committee, but be able to have a more interactive discussion, which is kind of what Karen's alluded to coming up in the future. How do we engage the community? And so she's a great person that we can start doing that with. And she has many followers, and her email list her distribution list is pretty considerable. So we'll continue checking into that and keeping in contact with Mrs. Berg.
So maybe at our next meeting, we'll talk about what you guys have figured out vis-a-vis converting to webinar. And she understands that we're planning like a webinar with actual live public input in I think we've got it in early February.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
she sort of would like one sooner. Is that right?
She would like, she watches all of our meetings, and
Nice.
she, all of our commissioner meetings and these meetings, and she just would like, she feels like it would be good if people could get closer as opposed to watching it through YouTube, that it would be a little easier if they could be almost directly opt into the meeting as opposed to finding it on YouTube. Just to make it simpler for people, more of a one-stop shop as opposed to cutting and pasting and doing it like that. That would be more clear government, was kind of the words that she used with me.
Okay, well, let us know what you think about that one. I have one question for you also. Who is assigned to check the email in case there are comments?
Jenny gets those every morning.
Okay.
So.
And I'm assuming that if there are comments, you guys can collate them and make sure we will see them at the next meeting.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we'll make sure
Thanks, Jenny.
anything that comes in for the RFA goes to the committee.
Great, perfect.
With the exception of the letter I got from the library system this past week. Karen, did you guys get that? I think it was forwarded to all the committee members.
Yeah.
About their potential levy. And so, pardon me?
I said they were looking at possibly 10 cents in February.
Yeah, so I attended one of their meetings last year when Blaine and Birch Bay were talking about maybe running a levy for both libraries, and thanks to Kathy Berg et al. And COVID, probably the Blaine Library got put on hold, and the Birch Bay is moving forward. So I had discussed with them, hey, if you're going to do this, it would be nice to let us know at the time as District 21, because being a junior taxing district, the library district would take away part of our last 50 cents. And if that number was a large number, it would certainly impact our ability to provide effective service. So I just asked if they'd keep me in the loop, which as of just this last week, they have. I did reply to her yesterday. I think Chief Vanderveen, I CC'd you and Jenny on that just to say I've received your information. We're meeting with the RFA today, and that we're currently working on a financial model. But I didn't want to certainly speak on behalf of the planning committee other than to say, thank you, keep us posted of what you guys are thinking of doing. And when we have a funding plan, we would share that with them. However, our timeline wouldn't be until August. Now, whether that would impact our overall plan, because if they're going to the voters in February for money and then we pop up in August, depending on how and when we set our levy rate, that certainly ought to be considered in our plan. And then a question I had, and I don't know if you know the answer, Karen, as to whether we're still bound by the junior taxing district as an RFA versus a fire district.
I don't know for sure. I have not ever had anyone in an RFA raise concerns about that. So I will confirm with Rich with a follow-up to Joe to make sure that we understand it. What is the interrelationship, if any, between a local fire, the RFA levy, and a local library levy? I'll find out.
I know as it would come off our last 50 cents as a fire district.
Okay.
So if they take 10, we could only go to $1.40 max. I just wasn't sure if that applies when you become an RFA.
I do not know. I will find out. I'm actually usually more worried about the school district renewals taking all the wind out of people's sails, because those dollar amounts are usually so much larger than a 10-cent.
Yeah, I don't think I think they're going to try to keep it 10 or under. They realize it's kind of a big issue. Although I think Birch Bay is far more supportive, has a larger base than the city of Blaine. Yeah, even if they did take 10 cents, we weren't intending to go up to even $1.40, in my opinion. I think we kind of floated around $1.35 as being maybe our maximum to start with, but we don't even know that until Bill gets our financial model in front of us. So,
Right.
But I think it's something we ought to be thinking about ahead of time, not wait till the very end and go, oh my gosh, we've got a library district coming in. Now what do we do?
Yeah. I'll get to Rich and we'll get back to you on that next time.
Thank you.
This morning, Karen had asked me to reach out to the assessor's office and find out about bank capacity. Now, this is just their answer. I have to follow up on it, but according to this office, neither District 21 nor District 4 have any bank capacity.
Okay.
So I have nothing more than a, you don't have any email back. I have not done any more research other than that. So.
And that was Rich Davis's instinct based on having represented you guys for quite some time, both of you. So, and 21. I'm just making a note of that.
Which translates into we can't just lift the lid on our own. We have to go to the voters.
That's right. Okay.
Except for the 1%.
Is that based on that we take the 1% every year, so there's nothing banked? Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we're on, anything else on the website, Chief, or should we move on to the governance bits?
We're off track there, sorry.
Okay, governance bits. So we had a great discussion last time about sort of preliminary thoughts on where you guys might want to head on governance. And so the memo in your packet is the follow-on to that, sort of states what your preference was and what some of the implications and next questions are. And we ran this memo past, of course, Rich, and who had some edits which are incorporated here, and Joe Quinn has taken a look at it and said it was fine. Joe sent a memo, a short memo to the District 4 folks, which y'all, I guess some of you received this morning, that said the memo is fine. And he raised again the fact that while usually he would recommend against keeping districts around, there may be a reason to do so if there is essentially a lot of banked capacity with the partner districts. That meant that if there was an economic collapse after the RFA was passed, you could choose to impose the levies of the fire districts instead of the RFA levy in order to capture higher levy rate and bank capacity. And so, but he's seen that happen once in one district, but we talked about, well, what if we don't have any banked capacity? Then it really wouldn't apply here. And so that's why we wanted Jason to check and see, just to confirm, is there any bank capacity? And apparently the word is that there is not. So that one situation where you might have an ability if everybody's property values started going through it to the basement, if you could fall back on earlier levy rates to collect more money, that doesn't seem to be a fact pattern that we would enjoy in this particular situation. So that was one thing he raised, and he also wanted to make sure that everybody understood what needs to happen if you keep the districts in place. And I think we talked about that before, and we'll talk about that again. As long as the districts remain in place, you need to continue to run elections for your respective boards, even if they're not conducting any business. They also have to meet and they have to do their annual filings with the state. So he wanted to make sure folks understood those things. So anything else you would add from that conversation, Chief?
No, I think you wrapped it up pretty good.
Okay, so what we're going to do this morning is then review where we left our heroes. That would be you guys, where you guys left off last time, and then talk about any further questions you have, and then maybe the next few data points and decisions that would have to be made to approach more of a final recommendation around governance. So unless you guys want to look at it on the screen, I'm just going to refer to this briefing that's in your packet. Does everybody have it in front of them, or would you like me to plop it up on the screen? What's easier for y'all?
Doesn't matter to me.
No, I got it.
You guys have it in front of you?
I have it.
Okay. Is that okay? We'll just keep working on it from look at what's in front of you then. Okay. So again, the first page there shows what the current election schedule is. And in November of 2021, there will be 2 folks that are be on the ballot to fill unexpired seats to which they were appointed. And there will be 2 folks whose terms have expired, and they will have a decision to make about whether to run again. And then an additional 4 seats are up for election in 2023. So that's where we are now. So the next page talks about what you guys were discussing as your thoughts about how to maybe have the initial RFA board. And because you won't be able to have any direct RFA board elections until November 23, if you're created in October of 21, the initial thought was, well, let's just have all of us sit on the initial board for the RFA, all 8 fire commissioners who are elected separately by the 2 districts. And that will work fine for a period of time. That will work fine through the end of 2023. And after that, in November 2023, all 8 of you who are serving on the board, well, except with 6 of the 8 folks will have had an election, and then there's sort of 2. Anyway, a majority of you will have stood for election, and at that point, the board is considered to be an elected board. And once the majority of them are considered to have been elected, and at that point, you need to sort of comply with the 1 person, 1 vote laws. And at that point, you would not, because there are 3 commissioners in the very small District 4 population-wise, and there are 5 commissioners in the much, much larger District 21. So the interim board structure of having all 8 of you all serve will be fine through the end of 2023, but going forward from that, you would need to move back to an appointed board or be in a position to have dissolved the districts and move to be an all directly elected board. And you had talked about moving to a 5-member board. I'm going to stop there and see if I'm making any sense at all, because it can get a little complicated.
I think
So-
representing what we said, I think the devil's in the details of what happens if, say, for instance, one of us resigns
Oh, good. Let me
from
speak to that.
the
Yeah. So,
RFA and not from the fire district, or vice versa.
so you had talked about, well, let's start with all 8 of us, but then if one of us resigns in the middle, we won't necessarily find a new appointment to the RFA board. And that works fine, but it doesn't obviate the fact that as long as you are a district in place and good standing, you need within 90 days, you need to fill a vacancy. So Bruce, if you resigned, District 21 would have 90 days to fill your seat, but your replacement, if you guys decided, your replacement would not necessarily need to serve on the RFA board. You could do that.
Got it.
Okay.
What is the earliest we can dissolve the fire districts?
The earliest you could dissolve the fire districts would pretty much be effective. The effective date would be the end of 2023, because you will need to have the districts exist to send people to your RFA board before then. The first time you can have a directly elected RFA board is November of 23 for starting in 24. So basically the districts need to be alive and kicking until December 31st, 2023. And so what you would want to do is sequence the dissolution vote prior to the November 2023 election. So you knew whether or not your voters, and you'd go to them in April of 2023 and you'd say, we'd like to consolidate down and have just the RFA. And if you agree with that, those people will all be on the ballot in November. And so what would get funky would be if one district voted to dissolve, but the other one didn't. So at that point, you could still move to an RFA directly elected board, but the other district would still be hanging around and they'd still have to have elections and you'd need to deal with them. Does that make sense so far?
To
Yeah.
prevent that dilemma, can the planning committee create an agreement that both districts will dissolve, or at least make an attempt to dissolve by then?
Yeah, I think you would want to, you could definitely do that. I don't know if you can bind a future board, but you could say it's our intent and agreement to place on the ballot on date X, a measure that we would both dissolve by the end of 2023. But again, even if that didn't happen, it would not preclude you. It's just inefficient if it doesn't happen. It does not preclude you from moving to the 5-person directly elected RFA board starting in January 2024. It just means you have commissioners from the districts hanging around with no job to do. And they will still have to periodically meet and do their corporate filings and keep their public records and all that stuff. They do not need to have an employee. They can still, they can have that work, any logistical records work can be contracted to the RFA or somebody else. But so they could exist. It's just, you've told the voters, presumably, that one of the reasons you'd like to do this is to streamline the whole governance of this already unified operation by moving forward into a single RFA rather than 2 districts. And if the voters don't approve the dissolution, they're going to have, as many as 3 districts hanging around.
So I may be redundant of what Bruce just asked. can we not, would it not be behoove us to write that into the plan? I don't think either district disagreed. I think we both plan on dissolving the districts, but if you had that written in the plan, it's there, but it's not enforceable, or what?
Yeah, it's a statement of intent. You would write it in as a statement of intent that the current boards of commissioners intend to place this on the ballot in 2023. And I think that's probably a good idea. It's not necessarily binding. Yeah. And that would be good. I think that would be a confirming signal to your voters that that's what you plan to do, which could be important in the initial outreach to them about this idea of an RFA.
Yeah, I like that also, just in case we have a commissioner change during that time, that whoever that new commissioner that comes in realizes that was our intention when we developed this. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Sounds good to me.
So the first question I have here and for you guys is, that whole question is, do you guys have a sense of when you would like to dissolve the districts? Again, the earliest you could do it would be to be effective at the end of 2023. There's multiple election dates you could choose. You should choose one before the November 2023 election date, so you know what's what. But if you are focused on eliminating them as soon as possible, that soonest possible date would be the end of 2023. And you'd probably want to run that election early in 2023, either February or April.
I think once you start going down that path, I think it's a good idea to keep it rolling. And so I would be in favor of doing it the earliest possible, so that the momentum doesn't get stopped and have to be restarted at a later time.
Any countervailing thoughts on that question?
I concur with Rich. And I think I can't speak for the rest of our board, but we can sure discuss it at the next meeting if we need to.
Some of them are here. Mark, what do you think about the idea of getting rid of the districts as soon as possible? You're on mute, sorry.
I think it's a good idea to probably dissolve them as soon as we possibly can.
Commissioner Andrews, what are your thoughts?
I agree.
Okay,
There you go.
all righty. We got 3 of 3. Scott, and
I think February of
2023.
23 would be perfect.
okie doke. Well, that's good. That's okay. So moving forward from that, again, the 8-member structure will work. And if you don't want to replace bodies on that, as they resign, you can totally do that. And so that, are there any further thoughts about that 8-member initial board shrinking based on vacancies? Any questions about that, or does that still seem like a good place for you guys to start?
Good plan.
Okay. I'm seeing some nods here from Dave and Mark, Rich, Scott. Bruce, you still okay with this idea?
I am. I think it's the simplest way. I mean, how do you eliminate one of us if you didn't? And I think that would create more difficulties than just saying everybody's in. If you want out of the RFA, you can do that. You're still committed to your fire district until it's dissolved, or you don't run for re-election.
Okay, good. So then we're going to move on to I'm on page 3 of that memo. It's 13 of the packet. Moving from that transition of the 8 members to the directly elected RFA board. And the preference that you had identified at the last meeting was a 5-person board where everyone was elected at large. And there are a few details to work out again. And I think the one question I wanted to revisit again is the question of at large versus districted. And this is really a political question as well as a sort of a practical question. The practical side is, if you have a lot of districts, how much trouble will you have finding qualified and interested people to run for election? the political side, I think, is how important will it be, particularly to the folks in District 4, that they have some guarantee that somebody living within your area is guaranteed to be on the board in the future. And if you think that that's going to be important to them, to supporting the RFA, then that would be a reason to revisit the idea of whether you wanted to include any districts in your board structure.
Question about District 4's area as Bellingham continues to gobble up area. Does that alter? I mean, if I currently live in District 4 now and Bellingham takes another bite, am I not in District 4 anymore?
Depending on how Bellingham does their annexation, yeah, probably you are no longer in District 4.
So, I mean, if we chose to do that and we had a viable candidate and then Bellingham comes in and takes another Pac-Man bite, that individual perhaps technically wouldn't be able to be a commissioner anymore. And that just adds more confusion to or workload, or, you know, now you got another election, there's election costs involved with that. You know, again, just being devil's advocate, what's the simplest way to do this? And at large, to me, seems the easiest, unless all of a sudden all 5 members live in Birch Bay or something like that. So
Mark and I have that situation where we're literally a couple blocks apart. And as the crow flies, basically, if Bellingham were to come in here and take our neighborhood, we'd both be gone.
Are you guys within the city's PAA, potential annexation area right now? Do you know?
I believe we're in the urban growth area. I don't know if it's a potential annexation area right now.
Right. I don't think they want us for the bedrooms, but bedroom community.
Nobody wants the bedrooms. They just want the businesses.
They've pretty much taken all the commercial out of this district as they
It's a
can.
time-honored tradition.
Ours is more surrounded around the watershed rights, you know, and what it gives them for Lake Whatcom, and that's the only reason they seem to keep wanting to buy up the last big pieces of land around here or take it, whatever they do.
So for those of you that live in District 4, do you think it's a political issue if you had to go to your folks and say, okay, we're going to streamline our operation, we're going to create a new government, and we're going to eliminate the 2 that we have, so it'll just be one unified operation. The taxes are going to be basically the same that we could authorize right now today, but we're just going to be doing it as a new agency, a regional fire authority. And our governance board is going to look different. Instead of having 3 of us from here and 5 of them from there, we're going to have a 5-member board, and everybody living in the RFA from the border all around to the lake and along the city limits can vote on all 5 of those people. How is that going to go with your folks? Are they going to say, whoa, we want to make sure that somebody from here is on that board? Or are they going to like, that sounds great? I know it's a hypothetical question that's hard to answer, but what is your sense about whether your neighbors will care about having a district that represents your territory?
I think that selling this item is very important, how we bring it to our voters. For example, a lot of our voters in District 4 don't even know they're in District 4. They had to put signs up. We have signs all over our district saying you are in District 4 because they don't know.
So where does that leave you on the question, Harry? Does that suggest to you that it's not that important to have a district rep because they don't know they're in the district now and they won't know they're in the district in the future?
No, I think if we can sell the RFA and they have that feeling of confidence and what we can do and how better their service will be, it would be no issue.
About districting.
Right.
Okay. What do you
Or about not districting.
So I'm not still so Harry, are you saying you don't see a big reason, you don't expect a concern about whether or not there's districting?
No, I think that if we sell this RFA and they can come on board with it, that's going to be the key issue.
districting will or the RFA will?
I think where Harry's saying is again, is it's not going to be an issue as long as we sell the message and the benefits of the RFA as a members at large. I think that Harry, if I'm hearing you correctly, because that's how I believe is that our community here probably wouldn't have a big issue with it as long as we're out. When we sell the market the RFA, and if we can pass the RFA, the benefits that come out of that are really what I think this community would be interested in more than where the members sit that represent them. I could be wrong, and Mark may have a little better feel of this for here, but
no, I think Dave, you're correct. That's what Harry's trying to say, is that as long as we can sell this RFA as making things efficient and being more beneficial to our taxpayers, that's what they're going to care about. They're not going to care about whether our governance is districted or it's appointed. I think being appointed is probably easier and is going to be better in the long run and cost less money rather than districting. I think Harry would probably agree with that. Is that correct, Harry? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I do. I agree.
Yeah. So I don't see from the three of us there being a problem with appointments in this future board in a couple of years.
Okay. All
Or
right.
not appointments, but they're at large, not districted. Excuse me. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. One thing I wanted to mention is that if you guys decided at a later date that the voters didn't want to dissolve the districts, but you had this 8-member board structure that was not going to be legal after 2023 ends, if you decided that you want in the future, if you wanted to change your mind and continue to extend the life of the districts and have representation from the districts on the RFA board, you can do that. But the plan that you've laid out to say we're going to start with 8, people leave, too bad for them. We won't refill their seats. We're going to try to dissolve the districts in early 2023, go to all 5-member new RFA board in November 2023, effective January 2024. That will all work fine. You will, if you all totally change your mind along the way, you still have some flexibility, but the plan that you laid out last week is totally fine. And it's pretty simple too, which I like. It's easy to explain to people. Okay, I'm gonna go. Are there any more comments on that? I think we're still tracking here. So the last couple of questions are around staggering and giving a heads up to future agencies that might want to join the RFA. So I'm going to start with the staggering question, and this has to do with making sure that all 5 of the RFA board members are not up for re-election at the same time. We'd be starting them all, unless you wanted, you could stagger their arrival, but that would mean that the districts would have to remain in place longer. If you're going to get rid of the districts or seek to dissolve the districts in 2023, then you will have to run all 5 members, all 5 commissioners for the RFA board would be on the ballot in November, all directly elected by everybody in the RFA, would be eligible to vote for them. And that's great. That's a good starting point. That's fine. But then you'll need to decide, you can't have that happen again. You're going to have to stagger the terms so that you don't ever have an election with all 5 of them are up. And you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you decide that. First, in terms of the pattern you're going for, if it's important to have a pattern of staggering, there's like 9 iterations. I mean, it's just crazy. You can see at the bottom of page 3 there, you could do some iteration of 4 people up in one year and 1 person up in another year. You could do 2, 3, 0, or 2, 2, 1. So you have lots of ways you could go about staggering the terms of the commissioner so that they don't all end at once. You can also just say, it's easiest to say that eventually everybody has 6-year terms, but you could always say, well, no, we're going to make sure that these seats and this seat is always a shorter term, but that might be perceived as slightly unfair to those seats. Let's see, do you guys have, and I think you can, so to pick the staggering pattern, you can do that in advance by saying, on the ballot. Seat 1 is going to be a 6-year term initially, and seat 2 is going to be a 4-year term initially, but after that it will be a 6-year term. And that's, you can put it right there in the ballot. Or you can say, we'll decide we're going to be moving for a pattern of X, either 4-1 or 2-3 or whatever it is. And we will make that decision of who gets the longer term versus the shorter term based on who gets the most yes votes in the election. So the people that got the most support would get the longer terms, and the people that got less support would have the shorter terms, and that would be based on whatever the staggering pattern was that you identified in advance. So that's the second way you could go about that. And the third way you could go about it, and the only reason I'm belaboring this is because you sort of have to figure out what you want to do. The third way you could go about doing it is saying, the winners of the election will all get together and we'll decide it ourselves after the election. And we know we have to have staggering of some sort, and we don't have strong opinions of what that would be. We just know that somebody is going to have not a 6-year term. At least one somebody is going to have to agree to not a 6-year term. And we will have a tiebreaker in case we can't agree, but we're going to let everybody figure that out on their own. And you just tell the voters that whoever wins is going to decide if they have a 2, 4, or 6-year term, and they'll live with that thereafter. The North County RFA people just did this. I think it's kind of odd, but it's entirely legal. So those are your 3 choices: decide in advance, decide based on the vote tally, or let the commissioners who are elected decide.
I liked option 1. It just seems easiest, but
it's the most transparent. I think the voters know exactly what they're getting in for, and the people running for office know exactly what they're getting in for too.
Yeah, I find it kind of funny that if the most popular vote getter got the shortest term, or that might be an advantage. If you get the most votes, you get to choose your term.
You get to choose. Yeah.
You may only want 2
You
years.
could do that. You could do that. Other thoughts about these options? Yeah.
I think it should be on the ballot. I really think. And I
agree.
My gut says we stagger them as far out as we can. So if we go 2-2-1 or something like that, so that the transition over time is better. I mean, if all of a sudden you got 4 people up for election, now you've got a brand new board with only one person who knows what the heck was going on. So if you could stagger it 2-2-1, in my opinion, but then on the ballot have the positions so that the person running can choose which position they want to run for. I mean, if I choose to run and I want 6 years, I would put my name in for that position. If I only wanted to do this for 2 years, I would put my name in
for a different position. And so just like we currently now have positions 1 through 5, they're established, we would create those same positions and timeframes up front. And then if we chose current members to run, we would pick which one we wanted to run for. Mm-hmm. Other thoughts about what your options are here and what makes sense to you?
I think the KISS principle should be applied here.
I haven't heard that for a while, Harry.
Yeah, I agree with both with Harry and Dave that it should be transparent, but it should also be, we should keep it as simple as possible.
And does simple seem consistent with this position gets 2, this position gets 4, this position gets 6, and mapping that out, and the most stable, I mean, the maximize the transition path to 2-2-1, that's the most.
Is that what the 2-2-1 looks like?
Yes.
I think it gives us the opportunity that way to also, if there were any concern for maybe this District 4 area being represented well or something, maybe one of those positions, I'd say Mark's, but one of those being the longer term, and that way it allows us to stagger those out. We can make,
I see.
I don't know if that makes sense, but it just seems like by being able to select and pick them ahead of time and put them on the ballot, it's done in advance. And
Mhm. What do you think, Scott?
Well, I like the 221, or could it be 212?
Yep, it could be 212.
You know, but I like I like it being spread out.
Yeah.
Over the year.
All right, that's consistent with you guys right now have a in District 21. I'm going back to the first page of that briefing. You guys
we're
have
kind
a
of weird.
You have a, what is this? Looks like it's a 311 is what you have now.
Correct.
Mhm. So we're talking about instead of going to a 212 or a 221. Okay. So any other, does that work for everybody so far? Any other thoughts on that one? Rich, do you have any thoughts on which way we should approach staggering?
I like the 221.
And you like naming it up front as part of the ballots? This position
Yeah.
gets that? Okay.
The most upfront, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so now that we're there, I just want to double back on one thing just to sort of test how we're going here. That first election, all 5 positions will be up. So that is your biggest risk point about discontinuity. That's kind of like a scary time for the chief. The way around that is to keep the districts in place longer and continue to have them have some representation for another 2 years on the board. Again, you'd have to run those elections, you'd have to do all the things and the stuff. But if your fear factor around having a slate of 5 candidates all being chosen at once, if that's really a significant hurdle for you, then we should go back and revisit how quickly we seek to dissolve the districts. Does that make sense? So I don't know if there's a bunch of people chomping at the bit to be fire district commissioners. I don't know what your level of concern is about having that slate up. A lot can happen in a couple of years. Any sense of that? Any concerns about that?
None here.
None here.
We don't seem to have anyone knocking down the door, either complaining about what we're doing or wanting to replace us at this time. Maybe as the idea of the RFA gets out into the public, people will seem inclined to either want to help out or run away screaming. I suspect runaway screaming is usually what happens in these positions. But
someone else. Scott, any concerns at your end on having that slate of 5 folks up in the fall of 2023?
No.
Okie doke. Chief, you'll have to live with this.
Sorry, Chief.
I'm a public servant. Well, I will do whatever the committee decides. It has a potential to be a lot of education that needs to be delivered for the first couple of years, and that could dramatically slow things down. So I would think that to have a mix of new and experienced, if that's what ends up happening, would be better. But if the committee decides to wipe the slate clean so everybody can run away, I get it.
Right. And so the place in your, so we'll just leave that on the table. Thank you for sharing that, Chief. The place in this memo, again, is page 13 of the packet, page 3, right in the middle under timing, transition to directly elected board analysis timing, the second bullet point there, alternately, if the districts wish to have a more gradual transition. That's where your plan B is. And we have until next April to lock this in. So I just want to flag that for you. And it would just mean leaving the districts in place for an extra 2 years.
yeah, I think that is against the reason why we're trying to do this is, let's dissolve the fire districts and move on with the new process. I mean, that
Yeah.
since I've been here, that's been the whole motive is to bring them together so there's just one, and then to go from 2 to 3 seems just counterintuitive to me.
So I'm hearing that you're, in terms of the reasons why we're going in this direction, are to get the consolidation of governance as soon as possible, because that's efficient. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this in the first place. And maximize the staggering pattern into a 2-1-2 or a 2-2-1, because that minimizes the turnover impact going forward. And pick the terms in advance because it is the most transparent to the voters. So I'm just trying to map the policy rationale I think I'm hearing from you guys on these points. Do I have that right? Is that sort of a,
Yep.
I got that? Okay.
Yes.
Transparent. Smooth. All right. Then the last thing I just wanted to chat with you guys about briefly is on the bottom of page 4 of that memo, which is anticipating later annexations into the RFA. And a number of you have spoken about the idea that over time there are maybe a couple fire districts, possibly Bellingham, that you guys could, this is a foundation for what could be a truly regional fire authority with a much bigger scope. And it can be sort of you might want to leave the welcome mat out. We would welcome these discussions when you adopt the plan. And there are ways, again, it's not binding because you can always change this governance structure by a majority vote of your board over time. But I've given you an example of how South Snohomish County did it. They just said, okay, anybody can join. We're fine with that. Here's our target maximum board size. It's 9. We'll rejigger that. We have a 5-2 structure. They had a 5 district, 2 at large. We may rejigger our structure at any point, but we know we don't want to get bigger than X. And we're totally fine having anybody that annexes in having a non-voting seat until the time that we can run that first election with them being included. So it's a simple way. It's you just pick the maximum, tell them they have a seat at the table until then, and understand that you can always change this by majority vote of the board in the future. Any thoughts about this at this point? Again, we don't have to cast it in stone until next April, but if you have some sense of where you might like to go on this, that's helpful.
I like us to keep it as simple as we can to present it to our voters, and then they'll be for it. So if we present them with some convoluted stuff for them to look at, I don't think it will go well at all.
I think though, Karen, what I'm hearing is writing it, just how we write it into our plan. It really isn't need to go on the ballot or anything like that.
Yeah, right. No, this is not on the ballot. This is probably not part of your public education campaign.
Right.
You might have a sentence that said, we anticipate that more people may want to join later, or you might not.
Perfect.
It's just what you might want to put in the plan detail itself that they could see if they chose to research, but it's not a high profile issue in the campaign. Thank you, Dave. That's a good point.
My only thought of, do we want to set a maximum? Obviously that can always be changed, right? I mean, if it's 5 this year and 5 years down the road we want it to be 7, we can do that. We're not stuck there. My thought being, holy cow, if Bellingham came in, that's a large area, and would we want to increase the board size at that point?
Yeah,
I would hate to sit on a board of 9 people personally.
it's pretty big.
I think if I were to set an upper limit, it would be 7. I don't know and that's assuming we take in a whole nother area that's as big or equivalent to what we currently are. A 9-member board is not appealing to me at all. So
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to just say, hey, we're going to be 5 and they can have a non-voting member until the next election. Or we say, if our area exceeds a certain square miles, we would up the board to no more than 7.
Well, I think we need to look back at why we originally wanted to do this was efficiency. We start talking about a 9-member board, that's far from efficient. You know? And I agree with Harry, you know, just keep it as simple as we can and keep the welcome mat out so that when people are thinking about joining, it's not something they have to really do a lot of research on. It's pretty simple. This is what we are. And
Yep.
we're adaptable if we need to be, but I would think we want to make it appealing and simple.
Okay. Other thoughts? Concurrence? Mark, where are you on this?
Exactly where everybody else is, and with Harry and Rich, and make it as simple as possible and very transparent.
Okay. Dave?
I'm there
Yeah.
with those guys.
Okay. Harry?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
That's keeping it simple.
So I think I'm hearing we won't make noises about maximum number of board members, but that we would probably say we would anticipate having discussions with them about the board structure if they come in, and having a non-voting person until their residents are able to vote. Is that sort of where we are?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Fine.
Now I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
If we go to a 7-member board after we're a 5-member board and we've been a 5-member board for say 3 years or 4 years. And if we want to go up to a 7-person board, does that require a public vote or no?
Nope.
Okay.
You just have to, that's what's so amazing to me, and frankly about these RFA statutes, is you guys can change your board structure at your own behest at any point.
The position would have to be elected though.
Yes, you can't, you couldn't say, and we're gonna, fill these 2 seats on our own by doing this. You'd say,
Right.
okay, we've decided to go from 5 to 7, so we have 2 more seats that'll be on the next election.
Yeah, that'll
So
work.
there will be,
Okay.
or whenever they're up. Yeah.
And
That's a good question.
That's kind of a double-edged sword because knowing that there is a lot of advantage to continuity in the board. So if you're thinking about quitting, or resigning for any reason, you need to think about that, because what if all of a sudden 4 out of the 5 resign, and the board can do whatever, you could have a whole different structure very quickly.
Right. That's right. That's right. And it's another reason to go back in terms of if you think it's likely that you would get a lot of people, say, resigning from the 2 district boards between now and the end of 2023, you might want to have some guardrails on there that said, okay, but we're not going to let the board shrink below X, and we're not going to let the board go to a place where it's all District 21 people and nobody from District 4 because they all resigned. And even so, we may want to put some guardrails in there about the minimum number of people on your 8, on your initial 8 board. Does that make sense? To Rich's point, there's something in this memo about that, just that if you don't have any idea how many or who people might resign between 21 and 23, what's the minimum size of the board you'd want to make sure is there? And is there some minimum composition from both sides? Because as a district, you'll have to fill those vacancies.
Well, didn't we already establish 5 as our minimum?
No, you didn't. You established 5 as your permanent board structure, but you could certainly say 8 and real shrinking to no less than 5. You could do that.
I believe that was my original.
That's what I thought he meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I missed that then. Okay. That's a good,
We
that's a
would,
good filling in.
I believe I initially suggested we start with 8, but do not go less than 5.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry if I missed that.
Nope.
And
Nope.
if we shrink to no less than 5, do you want to make sure that there is at least one board member from each district?
I would.
I thought we discussed that too, that there's
Yeah,
gonna
until it's dissolved.
yeah.
Until November of 2023, I think that would make sense.
Do you want to say at least 1 or at least 2 members from each agency?
I would say 1.
At least one.
1 from each district. Okay, got it. That fills in that blank. Thank you. That's, I think, you guys are great. We have made vast progress today. I think now we have a recommendation you guys can take back to your full board for separate discussion. I'll write that up. And we'll also have something that we can present to the public for their input when we start having those public outreach meetings. That is all I have. And so when we get the chief back, we can talk about, there he is. He's very fast. We can chat about the next item on here, which is the current org chart, what positions you might anticipate filling in, and what data we've found so far, just thinking about how quickly is demand for services likely to grow. We're still at the beginning end of that, but we wanted to at least have a starter conversation. And I'll turn it over to the chief.
Okay, thank you. So if you look at page 15 in the packet, you'll see kind of call for service data that we've pulled up. I would point out that you'll see in 2019 there was a significant increase in EMS calls. That's twofold. One is obviously the auto aid agreement we have with Bellingham, where we're responding more into certain spots and doing transports.
We can hardly hear you, Chief.
I think you must have switched mics or something with Chris.
I think you did.
If I can.
Sorry.
That's all right. How about if I yell? Is that better?
No, it's you're super quiet.
It's just that same situation we had with Chris's last time.
I don't know what to say. I guess so.
You know sign language? Never mind. I don't want the sign you might send.
Do a little bit. It's pretty ugly though. Mostly involves getting your jammies on and brushing your teeth. So calls significantly increased in 2019 due to the Bellingham auto aid agreement, as well as EMS. The county EMS changed the way we do some reporting. So in previous years, we were doing some calls for service, public assists, as we were just running them as public assists. Some things changed in late 2018, early 2019, to where we now run those as EMS calls. And I'm sure Commissioner Chamberlain knows what I'm talking about, but maybe calls that were a simple lift assist or fall out of bed, we started running them as actual EMS calls. So that's the reason for the increase. Since nobody can hear me, I'm going to kind of amend my.
Now.
You can hear me now. All right. So the next page 16, talks about population growth, expected population growth in Whatcom County. This came from the state, and it just shows the expected increase we're going to see here in Whatcom County. There is, as everybody probably knows, there's a lot of chatter about we may see additional numbers based on people moving out of the urban areas due to COVID, concerns about those kind of things. So it will be interesting to watch and see what happens with our population growth here in the more unincorporated parts of the county. Now, Whatcom County also has the restriction on well drilling, so that might limit some of it, but that will mean tighter densities in unincorporated areas for our areas that are already permitted to build in. So that could there's many factors that could cause some interesting patterns to arise. The next page, page 17, is it's entitled Proposed Forestation Staffing Model 2021. This is something I was using for something else and just repurposed it. But these are actually our currently authorized spots for folks. This is our current org chart. Not all these positions are filled, obviously. But this is what our current organization chart looks like today with it's just not filled out. And my anticipate that this would be the initial org chart for the RFA as well, because it represents everyone that works here currently. So I don't know if you guys can hear me or not very well, but is there any questions that I can answer? These are just kind of initial looks at these items, and we'll be using them more. We'll be using the data from these more as we move forward with planning.
Chief, are these all authorized positions now?
These are. I took a little liberty of renaming a division chief as an assistant chief, but these are authorized positions within Fire District 21.
And where would Chris's current position, is that included in this, since we know that all employees from both areas?
It is not at her current
Title, yeah.
At her job title, but there is with the coming up of the training consortium and the complexities in scheduling and really running that training area at Station 12. That's where I have that training operations assistant in. I mean, that's something that I was thinking of. We have a need for someone there. And,
okay.
As there's finances coming in and out of the training consortium and scheduling, complex scheduling type stuff, we have a need for a position there. So that would be
is that a new position then? Or, I mean, you don't have that in your structure now, but
we have a part-time training data entry person. I just expanded it to make it that to make it that slot, because that's if we were to kick this thing off next year, hopefully, we would not be able to service the training consortium or the training grounds at Station 12 without that position in place.
okay.
I think it's important too that everybody keep in mind is the positions are there. It's, how the chief, that's the chief's staff, and how the chief chooses to structure that staff is going to be up to him.
So
I guess, we're looking at this org chart. I mean, I've got all kinds of wants and wishes that we could throw in there that aren't economically feasible. But I don't know that if your plan was to now ask us what we think we need, I think we really need to get a handle on the financial piece of what we currently have, what it costs, what the levy rate is to continue that, and then build up the what's next. I mean, I'd love to say, could we have 4 more positions here and add battalion chiefs and, blah, blah, blah. And Bill comes back and says, well, yeah, if you want to charge $2.50, you might be able to do that.
Well, I think that you could still, I understand there is sort of a chicken and egg thing going on there. I think if you had a sense of what your priorities would be in terms of, if we could add 1 more person, what would it be? If we could add 3 more people, what would they be? And to start having some discussion about that might be helpful. But if we're not ready for that, the committee hasn't really had a chance to meet and start noodling through that. But I do still think that just thinking, okay, if this is baseline, and I think the first question to figure out is, do you think that for the next 7 years, given the rate of growth in services and population that we might anticipate, can this structure maintain your service levels?
Hmm.
Or will people be too taxed? Are you going to need more people, do you think, to maintain the service level that you have today in terms of response times, however you choose to measure them? Will this be enough for 7 years, or will you need more? What's your gut on that one, Chief?
Oh, we need more. We can't.
We need more.
Yeah, if growth continues the way it is, response growth, we would be very hard pressed. We'd be very hard. It would be almost impossible for us to continue with the staffing as it is today.
I think one of the things you always would like to be able to tell your voters is, this is the financial plan that can maintain your service levels. So even if we come back and say, well, this org chart, we can keep this org chart in place for 7 years for $1.25. But if you know right now today that your service levels will decline if you do that, that's not a good place to be when talking to the voters. So I always think of the baseline as what is needed to maintain service levels over time. So maybe you're adding 3 firefighters in year 3 and another 3 in year 6. I have no idea what it would be specifically for you, but I think defining that if we do this, our service levels should stay the same. And then think incrementally about what would you add to, and where would your service enhancements be prioritized? What would they be? What would be your priorities for that? That's where it starts getting interesting, and we want to try to have a consensus about, we need this to stabilize our service levels. And if we have the capacity to improve them, here's where we go first, and that would cost this. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the committee can meet and noodle on that and figure out, okay, yeah, well, if we're going to maintain service levels, we should be cautious and add a crew of, second shift, these stations, whatever, in this year, and sort of come back and model out why you think that's what you would want to do to make sure you could maintain your service levels. And that would be the baseline you'd want to model that we'd ask Bill to model. And then you guys would say, if wishes were horses, here's our first 3 increments of additional service. We would add an X, a Y, and a Z, or whatever they are. And we would do it here. Or we just figure out what those increments are, and then we can play with how quickly we can add them in the model financially. But it seems like the first thing you got to be able to do is tell everybody with a straight face and have the data to back it up. We're confident that your service levels can be maintained. And that may be, it's assuming that you may not be able to, if you start at $1.30 and your baseline is you got to add 6 people over the next 7 years, you got to add 2 tranches of 3 at some point. That may take a little bit more money, and you have the banked capacity for it, and you'd build that into your plan. So it doesn't, your baseline doesn't have to be something you can afford with your starting levy for 7 years. It's just your baseline is more about the service delivery than the cost. And if it looks impossible and you have to go to the voters and say, there's no way we can maintain our service levels, then we probably are at plan B. But I think you want to start with, we have figured out what it will take to maintain our service levels. We have a plan for that, and here's where we're starting at levy X. And you can anticipate that we would do, a 3-cent levy lid lift in 4 years to add a couple firefighters or whatever. We'll figure out what the cost is later, but it's the bodies and in what positions when that we need to. That's the starting point, I think. Okay. So is that something that's a committee task that you guys would want to?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think then it's just a matter of getting that committee together, and it's not like we're way behind here. We got time to do that, and you guys are doing your budget, and it's all crazy time. But when that committee can start pulling those together, their thoughts there, we'll put that on the agenda and come on back.
Okay.
Good.
Anyone have any other thoughts on this one? Well, we're just the starters, but any data points that you think will be particularly helpful to mapping this out that we don't have yet? No. Okay. Well, it'll be an interesting little math puzzle for everybody to figure out what that baseline staffing looks like. But we'll see that when the committee is ready.
Is there an idea when that committee is going to meet, Chief?
I'll send out invites after this meeting. I just needed to get through the end of the month.
Okay.
So our next, that's all we had on the agenda for today. I will send out before our next meeting, I'll send out a summary write-up of where your initial recommendation is on governance, and you guys can take it forward to your full commission for discussion. And our next meeting might include some of the more basic pieces of the RFA plan that we could fill in the blanks on. And other than that, I don't, it's just sort of, we'll just keep moving forward through the work plan as laid out. So did we have a date, Chief, for the next potential meeting?
Thought we did, but you know what? I didn't get a lot of response.
Uh-oh.
That one. I will send out another doodle poll. Yeah, I got kind of a mixed bag. I think there was too much going on.
Okay.
I'll send out another doodle poll right after this meeting, and we'll figure out what. Yeah, I only got half the committee kind of responded after that. So
there's a lot of things going on. Obviously, this month we've got budget preliminary numbers. I mean, we're going to have to hold a special meeting probably next week. The county finance people are enforcing a timeline that they haven't enforced before for the 1%. So that has to occur before our next regular meeting, and then we have our regular meeting, and then we have Thanksgiving, and so
you guys want to aim for December?
And we have regular budget, and I mean, we haven't even had a budget workshop or a combined meeting with D4 and D21 about budget. So I'm almost inclined to say November's kind of shot.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about this org chart, that's not going to happen in 2 weeks either. So I would say in assistance to the chief, maybe we go out into the first week of December.
Yeah, maybe the second Wednesday, the second, or looks like, or the Thursday, the third, somewhere in there.
I think that's a good idea too.
Yeah.
I think
Those
you
are
guys
wide
have made
open for
such
me.
progress on the governance. I don't think that'll cramp our style. And Bill's not doing anything until he gets numbers from y'all. So
we can't get numbers till we nail down a budget.
right. Well, it's really the baseline that he's going to need, the baseline staffing levels that he'll need to crunch.
Nope, am I not on again? He's got some stuff, and there's more stuff coming this week. So
Okay, good.
I'm trying to keep him loaded up.
He's very excited about that number, those numbers. Okay, I think sometime in the first week of December sounds perfectly fine from your schedule perspective. We should be able to make that work.
Okay.
So are you going to doodle the first week of December and see where we're at?
Sir. Yep.
So first week of December it is. Anybody else have any comments about that? Sounds like we're all good. Any closing comments? Closing comments from District 21 commissioners?
I'm happy the way things went today. I like the whole governance piece and the statement of intent to dissolve the districts and the staggering terms. I think that was a lot of decisions today, and I'm glad that Harry pointed out the KISS principle so that we can all focus on getting this thing done.
All right. Any comments from the District 4 commissioners?
None here.
I just want to say I thought this was echo Bruce's comments. I think it was really productive on figuring out the governance and just like Harry, just keeping it simple. So it makes things easy going forward. And it also makes things transparent. So the more we can do that, the easier it is. And also, I think being that we were able to hash a lot of that out, wait until December for our next meeting isn't a bad idea. There is a lot going on this month. And Ken can't, he had another call, so he's not here. Any comments at all, Ms. Sparks?
No, thank you.
No. All righty. So we'll be looking forward to that doodle poll for that first week of December. I think we've covered everything in this agenda. And do you have anything else you want to add, Chief or Karen?
Nothing from me.
Okay, well then we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Fisher. Seconded by Andrews. Everybody in favor of adjourning the meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye and
Anybody
aye.
opposed? All right, the meeting is adjourned at 11:29. Everybody have a good weekend and be hearing from you shortly.
Thanksgiving.
Good Thanksgiving, yes. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey, Mark.
Mark.
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Karen.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris.